Okay, well, we've just got the last of people signing in. We'll call the public meeting to order. Under the agenda, under delegations, Wendy's here, and so we'll add that as a delegation to our agenda. So as amended, can I have a motion to accept the agenda? Okay, all in favor? And that is carried. Motion to confirm the minutes of the November 3rd, 2020 council minutes. Any errors? If not, can I have a motion to accept those? Okay, all in favor? And those are carried. Okay, Wendy, we'll let you be the first delegation if you like. Stand up and.
So I'm reading a letter written by concerned citizens of Crossfield, dated November 13, 2020. To all acting members of the town of Crossfield, council and employees, this letter is to state our concern and opposition to any proposed unlawful public health bylaws that would infringe on the rights and freedoms of individual Crossfield residents and its patrons. Please be aware that if this council attempts to enforce any unlawful mandates such as forced social distancing, tracking and tracing, forced masking, or a forced lockdown, there will be a legal action campaign initiated. A notice of liability will be delivered to hold every council member and employee accountable for their illegal actions. The following is a list of validating concerns and points to support our stance. There are two completely opposite scientific modes of thought regarding the COVID virus and how to manage it. How can elected council and employees with no medical background presume to know which is correct? The world has already seen the resulting negative impacts of these draconian measures on the physical and mental health of populations. Crossfield is no exception. Most residents choose Crossfield as their home because of the benefits of small town living and extra freedoms it brings, not to be dictated to or micromanaged. These types of unlawful mandates cause an immense amount of additional division, pitting neighbor against neighbor, causing unnecessary anger, resentment, and distrust. Forced measures on businesses are to imply that the business owners and employees are then responsible for enforcing these unlawful practices and policing their own customers. Thus, the impact on small business is increased. These isolating practices have not been proven to be beneficial to containment or spread or prevention. Containment of spread or prevention. Again, arbitrarily picking signs that supports a certain narrative is not what the town of Crossfield is in a position to do. Wearing masks and causing fear of interacting with others is dehumanizing, having the biggest impact on seniors and children. Being in close proximity and seeing people's faces is an extremely important part of mental health. Such practices are also discriminatory to those with relative medical conditions, including the hearing impaired. Any thought or planning to move forward with such mandates is a gross overstepping of governmental powers. Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Section 7 states, everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. The two-step analysis quoted by the Canadian Department of Justice states, Section 7 protects a sphere of personal autonomy involving inherently private choices that go to the core of what it means to enjoy individual dignity and independence. This aspect of liberty includes the right to refuse medical treatment, i.e. masks, and the right to make reasonable medical choices without threat of criminal prosecution. The aforementioned charter, quote, is interpreted so that no government has the authority to make such demands. It takes no time at all to search the internet and find that there are groups of people all across the country who have the same concerns, perhaps millions. The town of Crossfield's job is to act in the interest of our greater good. The previously discussed unlawful mandates do not fit this criteria. When do these practices go away? When does it end? When the cases are zero? When there is a vaccine introduced? We, these concerned citizens, expect the town of Crossfield to maintain a level of autonomy and have the courage to decide their own course of action, not to simply follow in lockstep with surrounding communities in the vain hopes of continuity and inclusion. We expect the right to choose and will not stand for the infringement of our individual rights and freedoms. Those participating in such personal violations will be held responsible. Most sincerely, and there are about 42 signatures.
Okay, so thank you for that presentation, Wendy. We're accepting it for information. It is read into the minutes of our meeting. No decision has been made prior to this, but it will certainly be taken into consideration when and if we make a decision. So thank you for that presentation. For now, we've just received it for information. Okay? Okay. Okay, and you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you like. If you would, if you'd rather continue on your evening, then you're more than welcome to do that as well. Rocky View Regional Handy Bus. Oh, there's Paul. Thank you, Paul. We've given you about 15 minutes on the agenda. I don't know if that's enough time for you.
I'll try to be quick.
Okay.
Okay. I forgot what button I pushed to do. There we go. My name is Paul Siller. I'm Executive Director of Rocky View Regional Handy Bus. I'm delighted to have an opportunity to meet with council and give you a quick, hopefully a quick overview of what we've been up to, what we do, how things have been going these last chaotic months, and where we might be going. We provide, our motto is we provide community transportation for community transit for community transportation needs. Maybe more precise is we provide wheelchair accessible transportation for people who need physical access to community supports and services that enable them to stay in their home. That could be a doctor's appointment, that could be groceries, that could be a lab appointment, that could be a specialist appointment, that could be dialysis, it could be visiting a friend, it could be going to a hospice. In 2019, we did about 21,000 trips, covering some 600,000 kilometers. Oops. There we go. So, Rocky View Regional Handy Bus, a little bit about the region. In 1980, we were founded as a Crossfield Rocky View Eric Balzac Society for the Handicapped. The letters CRAB became important, Crab Society. We built mostly good stuff in the North Rocky View area. It turns out that I've got some it was in the late 80s that Crossfield started sending a delegate to board meetings of the organization. In 2003, we changed our name to Rocky View Regional Handy Bus for a couple of reasons. One, we got tired of all the crab jokes. We heard all of them. And two, it really didn't explain what we were trying to do. We were wanting to provide service as far as what we call the Rocky View District. And the new name helped us focus on that. That time also helped us with the realization that not everyone in the neighborhood is a senior or someone with a disability and needs transportation. It turns out there's a small percentage of people who are in awkward times, socially vulnerable because of circumstance, they don't have access to a car anymore, and all they need is a few rides to help get them back on track, so they can meet this person, get to that doctor, and so forth. So we broadened it out and stopped being a handy bus, a community bus instead. 2006, we started working down in the southeast Rocky View area. We, with Chestermere and Langdon service. And in 2010, the nonprofit group in Cochrane had said, we want to hang up the keys, you can keep the buses running. So by 2012, we had been covering all of this area, actually picking up in Bragg Creek, picking up outside of Bicycle, and always having passengers in Crossfield, sometimes over in Botchwell, and way down in Langdon. It was about this time we realized we're dealing with 4 or 5 municipalities, and it's really challenging to make 4 or 5 different business cases, especially when we're trying to share the ride. If we take 2 people from here in Crossfield, one only needs to go to the lab in Airdrie, the other's going to the Hawaii Hospital, and we drop one off in Airdrie. We pick up someone in the Balzac area, maybe Sharp Hill or whatever. We drop both off at Lougheed, then pick up someone at the Lougheed, run them over to Chestermere, double back to the Lougheed, pick up one of those people from Crossfield back. There's 4 or 5 trips shared amongst 3 municipalities. How do you create a business case where you can apportion this stuff out? Turns out you don't. What you do is you look at the whole picture, and you ask everybody to contribute equally on a per capita basis. That gives us money to keep the buses open and ready to go. Passengers pay for $4 for every 10 kilometers of travel. That gives us money for the gas. We fundraise for the buses. We pick up extra side work. School board work for complex learning needs kids or kids in wheelchairs. And sometimes things like for the next few months, we're the interim service provider for City of Airdrie as they straighten out their transit plans. Sometimes it's how bus will travel. So the actual program is very basic. Monday through Friday, weekends, no evenings, no holidays. 7:30 to 4:30. Okay, we make a bit of an exception for morning dialysis runs, but you got to book ahead. Although it's run by the Rocky View Regional Handicap Society, it's not very handy. You got to plan. It's kind of like booking your flights. You got to know what time you want to be in Toronto, so they can figure out the right flight to get to Toronto. You know what time, and you have to know what time you're ready to go, so you get the correct flight back. We don't care about why you need to go anywhere. So we say there's no problem with travel purpose. There's obviously time-sensitive stuff, and then there's flexible stuff, like groceries or visiting a friend in the hospital. The one thing we don't really worry about is travel to the airport. We can only get you there between 8 and 4. It never works out well. There are taxis available. That's probably the only exception to what we do. However, we don't really have the funding to do things like employment transportation. So we limit everybody to 20 trips a month. That's 10 round trips. That's enough to deal with dialysis or physio. Okay, we get a little creative, which one's got 3 weeks of chemo to take from and such, but we don't have resources to take someone to work every day. That is another level of funding of our operation. We figure we can get the most bang for our buck by capturing a segment of people who just need a hand so they can stay independent. Then the pandemic. Well, one of those lines is a 3-year average. The other line is this year. And we went from 650 trips per week down to, 650 trips per week down to 200, or more likely 140 trips a day down to 20. The pandemic changed a lot of things for us. Now we always cleaned our buses, and we actually got some compliments that we do a bang up job on that, but we now have enhanced cleaning. We're basically cleaning the buses every other day. Plus we're sanitizing them, wiping down the hard surfaces after every trip. We're also spray sanitizing every other day for the contact surfaces. We're using our larger buses to keep people spread apart because we're dealing with vulnerable people. We're dealing with people who are elderly. We're dealing with people with immune compromised situations. And if we're not dealing with that, we're dealing with people who have loved ones at home who have those situations. So we also got handed with plexiglass screws and ankle brackets, put a couple of barriers in on the top of the seats that compartmentalize things a bit better and made masks, strong requests for masks while driving. And then lastly, we screen passengers. When people make their booking, we tell them that if you're feeling ill, you really should cancel. You'll probably not be led into the professional's office anyway if you're ill. When we make our schedules, we call everybody back to give them a precise pickup time. And we remind people again that if you are feeling ill, you should cancel. And some people actually cancel while we're making our pickup time call. So we dropped 95% from 140 down to 20. And now we're coming back to 50 kind of trips a day, maybe 60 sometimes. And that's great. People are starting to get to those surgeries and appointments and therapies that they used to do. We have one new problem though, where we used to take 4 people. You want to distance and spread them out inside the bus, we're only taking 2. So we're only at 50% of our usual workload, but we only have 50% of our capacity to work with. That's a work in progress for us, but it's something that we are working on. There are obviously some financial problems, challenges. When we, our school contract, force majeure, stopped existing, there was a little bit of help from them, but our user fares, which could be $100,000 a year, they dropped substantially. But on the other hand, when you have to lay off 19 of your staff for 3 months and have them served, you do actually get some wages and some savings on using fuel. Our $12,000 a month fuel bill went down to $2,000 at one point. Other funding also, we are a charity, we fundraise to get buses. It's kind of hard to fundraise for a bus, which is a big picture, long-term thing, when everyone's worrying about folks who are struggling to make ends meet or food hampers and such. So we had to put some things on hold. Fortunately, we are eligible for some of the federal programs, emergency wage subsidy, business assistance, as well for the staff. So we have a little bit of unspent money that we're going to have to deal with. Well, we will deal with. The 21-23 outlook for us is a couple of things. One, we are going to have to become more nimble. We were meeting demand, but we're very rigid about what we can do, and we had plans for days ahead, and we weren't very flexible if someone's appointment changed as people are shuffling things around. We also, when we combine people, we could drop someone off. If you have a 10 o'clock appointment, we have no problem dropping you off at 9:25, 25 minutes, or 35 minutes ahead of your appointment. We don't want you to be late. If we've got 2 people on the bus, both have 10 o'clock appointments at 2 different hospitals, someone's got to get dropped off early, and someone later will have to be picked up later. Well, now we can't wait again. We can't have people waiting in professional offices. That's getting to be a little bit of a challenge. We're getting a lot of problems of, oh, my doctor canceled a clinic today, so now I'm not going. We're not very flexible with our current system to make those kinds of changes, because we're used to a system or an era where we didn't have these interruptions. To amend that, we're going to upgrade our scheduling software. We have the light version of scheduling. When you're planning out trips into Calgary, everything's 45 minutes to an hour. It's not that hard. we're now going to use some of the federal reimbursement money to upgrade our software. And that'll help us be more nimble, take more people with the existing equipment, and also just reduce some staffing costs. We obviously have some minivans. They're not really helpful anymore because where we used to get 2 or 3 people in a minivan, wheelchair accessible, wheelchair maybe an attendant. We're going to have to be fundraising aggressively to replace minivans with larger buses. And we realized that we've got some carryover funds. We've been telling all our municipal partners that not only did we keep the same rate per capita in this year as we can. We held last year's rate, 770 from 2019. We used that in 2020. We're going to keep that for next year because every municipality is trying to figure out how they're going to pay for anything and everything. And then in later years, we'll try to catch up to what we wanted our fundraising to be. We'll be talking to you again in a year to see how 2022 is shaping up for you financially and such. But our plan at the moment is to hold if we have leftover funds, we'll be using them over the next year and into the year after that as required. While the cost of having a community transit handy bus at $7.70 per capita might be considered kind of high. It turns out when you look at the other services in Alberta that are members of the Urban Transit Association, we're doing pretty good efficiency. We're really pleased to be able to say that while we're getting an average of $7.45 of municipal support to run our program, if you were a Calgary ratepayer, each ratepayer is contributing $29. So we are feeling that we're getting managing to achieve a certain economy for municipalities, a certain level of accessibility to supports passengers need, and there's room for growth in all respects. So we, after this all settles down, we're going to keep developing ourselves as a community transit provider. We'll, by improving capacity and our ability to respond to people's needs to public transportation, try to improve our stakeholder satisfaction. And as more municipalities go, we'll probably have to face a new level of activity of making some criteria who can use the bus, because there'll be a regular transit service coming in, Crossfield to Airdrie and such. We'll have to figure out who's who and where. But we all look forward to those days. Maybe we all have more wonderful complications. Thank you.
Paul, do you have that presentation that you can send us to? Because some of that's too small to read.
Oh, sure.
If you can get it to Lindsay, then she can send it out to us.
Sure.
And I just have a couple of questions. When's your year end?
Year end is December 31.
Okay, and so when do you think you're going to have your audited financials available?
We have our audited financials available for our annual general meeting, which is the last Thursday of March.
Okay. And one quick question, if you can speak to it quickly. The funding that you got from the county, $300,500?
Yes.
And it was the same last year as this year. Can you just briefly speak as to what you spent that on?
Well, that is calculated at the same rate. Money we get from the county, money we get from Crossfield, money we tend to use that just to that covers the portion of our budget to be available. The bus is ready to go, the basic salaries of. All the municipalities pay the same, we try to get everyone to pay the same rate each year. So just as Crossfield paid $7.70, the county paid roughly $7.70. Chestermere will be paying $7 per person. then the check we get depends on how many people are in the county.
Right. So that 305 is there per capita?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any other questions from council?
I have one. So you mentioned some other fundraising. What other fundraising that you do rather than the municipalities?
We do targeted fundraising to corporations and such to raise funds for buses. Pretty much most of our buses have been bought by donation, or we do the usual casino thing. We do the community initiatives program grant. We sometimes are named in someone's obituary as donations to Rockview County. We don't, in the industry, it's called a little bit more targeted. We go after, I tend to go after corporations in the neighborhood and ask them, can you help us help your neighbors on that kind of thing.
Okay, service clubs as
We do
well.
service clubs, Rotary West, Calgary Rotary West did a quarter of a bus some years ago. The UC, Universal Commercial Travelers. We go through the circuit. It's just been a chaotic time in 2020. And I have to be honest, in 2019, we were kind of so busy that we never really could take a deep breath, start going after the lions and the eagles and the elk and so forth. So we don't have a designated fundraiser. It's sort of a side of the desk thing. It's a little tricky sometimes to make it a dependable stream.
And Paul, if you could, can you send us also, along with that presentation, your last year's financials, just because we're going into budget and take a good look at it. Last question I have for you with regard to your board. It's not specifically municipalities. Your board's just kind of made up of people that are interested. Is that
yes
correct?
So our board, the whole developing regional service and the concept is a work in progress, and sometimes we have more resources to work on the minutiae of the governance. We effectively run as any organization under the Societies Act. We offer each municipality the option of nominating someone to be appointed to our board or to be voted onto the board. So technically, for all those years, it was a councillor from Crossfield. We were supposed to collect $5 every year as a membership fee, and then they are a board member just like everybody else. But we have, as we started the regional view and scope and initiative, we really did push hard to get other municipalities to send a delegate, either a community delegate or an elected official or even someone from administration to do. And one of the things that made it so much easier was there was this long-standing participation from Crossfield. But our other, we've got disability activist who's in Calgary. We've got a couple of people who, a former town councillor from Irricana. We've got, the guy who actually ran that Cochrane handy bus thing and is retired. He's on our board as well. And a small group of people to make sure that we're moving forward and keeping a bigger view of it.
Okay, super. Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. The next delegation, downtown placemaking strategy.
done ourselves. Stuff here. All right, my name is Karen Domestic. I'm the president of Park. Park stands for Promoting Artistry and Culture, and we're a nonprofit organization that. A little louder.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're old, I'm old.
No, that's okay. If you need me to talk louder, I can talk louder. You're, okay, wonderful. I can project. That's something you can do. So we're not a nonprofit organization that supports and promotes emerging artists in Alberta, and specifically work in urban placemaking projects. So really working on different projects that are meant to attract tourism, that are meant to attract engagement, and yeah, bring a little bit of color and life to different communities. So we can kind of go through, do have a presentation prepared at, it's usually around half an hour. So we'll just, if I'm going too fast, let me know, jump in with questions. I'm happy to kind of make it a bit of a casual engagement. So in terms of overviews, we're going to go over some project goals, some of our previous work and other work in communities. We're going to go through some concepts that we've come up with for Crossfield. And then as well as some ideas for partnerships, a lunch event for the new downtown redevelopment, some budget options, and some recommended artists. So going through that. Can you go to the full page view? It's fine if not.
The next presentation will be available to us after as well.
Absolutely, it'll be a little bit to go over. There we go. That's a little bit better. So in terms of project goals, I think the main thing with all of these urban placemaking projects is you really want to drive traffic. Like if you're not getting any ROI back from investing in the community, there's not really any point in making that investment. So what are some different things that you can do to drive that traffic down? So looking at attractive colors, positive and well-curated art, something that all ages can interact and engage with. We do really specialize in kind of those Instagrammable experiences and things that'll draw, that kind of millennial and Gen X generations down, as well as to help attract new businesses and new industries. A lot of our projects get a lot of PR. We just launched a project in Abbotsford, and we're featured on all the news stations. We get quite a bit of media attention, and we are, in addition to being a not-for-profit, specialists in PR and communications as well. Looking at different ambience and decor sightlines. So how do you physically and mentally transport somebody into new space and feel like they're going into something new kind of area, as well as working with the community. One of the things that we stand for the most is how do we draw in and get community buy-in? So can we use local artists? Can we use artists from the surrounding areas? Or can we work with kind of that next generation of emerging artists? So maybe partnering students with more experienced artists that might be in different fields. So really kind of looking for that. And then as well as, doing things like different surveys or getting some community buy-in engagement and seeing what people would be interested in investing in. And then one of the things when you're talking to some members of the community as well, we work a lot with Mark, laying on some of our set decor and building. And we're kind of talking about, Main Street and all the work that's gone into it, and how do we kind of keep that historic look and historic feel, but add some additional components to that. So kind of moving on, so basically kind of looking at some of the initial plans for the downtown development. We know that it's design inspired by history. We know that, kind of keeping some of the historic elements and facades are important. We've gone over some of the revitalization plans and wider streets and planters and all of those things. So I think a lot of the things that we're looking at doing or we'd like to propose to doing are in consideration of those elements. So what drives success? So for us, with all of our projects, a lot of the things that we've found has been artist collectives. So not just focusing on one artist, focusing on a series and a group of different artists. Each of those bring in their different networks and their different fans and followings. As well, when you're pitching, to PR and trying to get attention, talking about multiple angles, multiple stories, artists from different backgrounds is a really important part of that story telling component. Color palette, something that's bright, punchy, eye-catching. That's always something to draw people in, as well as location, accessibility to the artwork, so that it's not just, from far away. People can get up close. They can maybe not touch it because of COVID, but they can interact and take a selfie with it or get up and close with it. And as well as usability, really making sure, especially right now with COVID-19, that all the pieces that we're proposing can be used during COVID times and as well as afterwards. So
past projects that we've worked on, we'll kind of scroll through. So the first thing, so in 2019, we did a project called Chroma YYC. So this is at South Center Shopping Center. It's increased traffic by 5% to the center, which had been seeing declining traffic for the previous 3 years to that. It had over 12 million PR impressions and performed incredibly well on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We also had over almost 4,000 posts on Instagram using the Chroma YYC hashtag, which is pretty significant for a project of its size. And we have some photos here. Another project that we did in Edmonton called Oaklandia. So really colorful, it had a lot of optical illusions and different line work. Another project that we did in 2020 was called Block Party YYC, and this was really cool. It was a 200-foot road mural that we actually had an artist hand paint. And then there's all of these interactive components for kids to play on, so different things like hopscotch and snakes and ladders, so something that the community could really engage with. This as well got over 10 million PR impressions, and it was actually covered nationally. So the Globe and Mail covered it, Retail Insider, and then Design World is an international design site that picked up the project. There's some drone footage that we had there and some content that we captured. So not only do we do the different experiences, but we also help capture the photography, the drone, and do all of that communications piece as well, which is find is important because investing a lot in these pieces, but if nobody knows about it or can see it, they don't do much good. So the storytelling is a really important part of that. Also, in 2020, we did the social distance circles at St. Patrick's Island, Calgary. So looking at how do you create art and kind of instead of looking at COVID as a negative thing, how do we turn it into a positive thing and a way for the community to interact and engage with. So this is a place for people to do fitness classes or to do yoga in the park. And then similarly, we did Vibrance YYC, so we did semi-permanent installation, again, with the intention of doing different fitness classes. All right, so that's a little bit about us and a little bit about our background. So what about Crossfield? That's what we're here to talk about today. So we have lots of really fun ideas, lots of different options and areas, and we'd love getting presentations, feedback, and thoughts. One of the first ideas that we had was how could we use light as a medium? So could we do different light installations on some of the buildings, and specifically not on that railway street, but on some of the, so like things like Netton Ave, on some sides of the buildings. And then we kind of have on the next slide here some different ideas of, what does light art look like? So it doesn't have to just be a design. It could be, different neon elements. It could be words. It could be words of inspiration. There's lots of different ways that you can kind of play with this medium. In addition to this, or instead of, you can also look at things like mural art. There's two different applications that we're pretty familiar with. So whether it's painting and everything being hand painted, or we can do decals. So we work a lot with these semi-permanent decals. So that's more of like a 6 month to 1 year duration. We can do them on windows, we can do them on the ground, we can do them on walls. So if you don't want, like as a property owner, you're not willing to commit to a piece, for 5 to 10 years, this is a really great option to have, semi-permanent kind of install. And again, really eye-catching, really fun. That kind of younger generation really loves it. All generations really love it. In terms of another location, we were looking at the side of the new Donut Man building. I think that's going to be, a hit when it opens. Everybody's been talking about it a lot. And we thought, injecting a little bit of color into that space could be a really fun idea. These are just some different ideas of different line works. We always take the Linwood District in Miami as a big inspiration. They redeveloped 60 square blocks of old warehouse spaces, and now it's an international tourism site. And then other ideas we had was on the core controls building. So how do you also animate things like your back alleys, your parking lots, some of those dead spaces and in-between spaces that might be vandalized or might be more prone to crime. So this is a way that you can really kind of inject a little bit of color and light. And again, the murals can be on their own, or they can also be paired with different like activations and installations. So if there are some dark spaces in dark areas, you can kind of work with both of those together. These These are some examples of some different alley murals, and again, some other locations that we were looking at around town. You can also pair them with seating, so if there's any properties that maybe have patios that they want to do in the summer, it's a really great way to kind of engage and draw people in for that. And with COVID sticking around, I'm sure patio spaces will be pretty popular on Railway Street come springtime. Another thing was garage doors, like super easy way to, to kind of activate and engage a space. And you could have something a little bit more playful, like the light mural, or you could do something a little bit more abstract that just brings the pop color. Some other ideas that we had too, and this is kind of where somebody like Mark would come into, is could we have some different street sculptures? So maybe a mural in the background, there's some 3D elements or 3D components, something a little bit more layered, where people can take photos with and interact and have some fun with. And then this is one that we really loved, and I think like we're talking about what kind of creating, what is that landmark for Crossfield, and the grain elevator, that it stands over 150 feet high, and maybe doing a large piece or something that we could get some really incredible national press, and people coming from Calgary and Airdrie just to see it, take photos of, or take photos with it in the background. So if you do a large scale piece on a landmark like that to kind of create that spectacle and that moment of people kind of traveling to the town. So those were kind of our main ideas, and then we had a little bit about partnerships and engagements. So not only are you creating these pieces of art, but how do you involve the community? So how can you involve the downtown stakeholders and ratepayers? So can you work with the businesses to say, hey, what are your brand colors? Or who's your target demographic? Or who are you trying to attract? If we do get press and media attention, how is that going to impact your business? And I think involving them in the conversation from the beginning is a really important thing, and something, we've been working in the retail sector for over 12 years, and definitely involving them from the start is really important. As well as people like the Crossfield Farmers Market. This seems like such a natural fit for them. I'm sure there's already been discussions about having them, set up on Railway Street, maybe on a Sunday afternoon or whichever day of the week. But, shutting that down for pedestrian traffic and really trying to encourage and engage. And then maybe there's, different opportunities for people to have more to do than just shop. There's different ways for those photo opportunities in some of those moments. People like CP Furniture, the 4-H Club, the library, like maybe there's different things and different programming that can be interacted with this. And of course, different community events, local business, and then also tourism. We do a ton of work with Travel Alberta, and are work on several campaigns with them. So is there ways of engaging them and encouraging, maybe them to come and do a photo shoot of the new activations, and kind of getting them to do a campaign on behalf of Crossfield. As well as just, general placemaking for different community activations and events. In terms of justification, so we have seen this with all of our past projects. Different foot traffic in all these different areas has been increased with every single one of our projects. Like we just, again, launched that project at Abbotsford, and it's by private appointment only for people to come and take photos in this light tunnel that we have for Christmas, and we're sold out of appointments for the next 3 weeks. So these projects do work, they do drive traffic, and it is something I think to consider when you are launching these new developments. In terms of our next slide, so now how do we launch everything? So one of the things that we do as well is not just placemaking, but how do you activate those places? We are event specialists and have been doing events for, again, over 12 years. And so we thought, how fun would it be to invite everybody down and have a weekend festival, whether it's socially distanced or not, depending on how COVID does. Maybe partnering with different community stakeholders. So whether it's the farmers markets, maybe it's fitness studios, maybe there's yoga in the parks or on the streets, like the side streets, or maybe we have some local entertainers coming down and the businesses doing different activations. Maybe there's things like, a gardener's market. So maybe things about, having people come and sell different trees and plants and florals, having different vendor contests, food trucks, fitness programming, entertainment with a stage with live music, and maybe a beer garden featuring Alberta breweries, maybe some tastings or some contesting there, and different family activities to complement that. So kind of that idea of, bringing the community together, and especially because they've been, so far apart during COVID, wanting to really kind of inject a little bit of life and fun back for everybody. And then the budget, it's just always the, the big line item. And we've gone into quite a bit of detail here. So, I mean, the way we work is we're very transparent. We like to lay it all out, like this is what these different items cost. And in addition to that as well, we are willing to kind of do a little bit of a Chinese menu of different options. Like it doesn't have to be just this amount, or this amount. Like we've, on the next page, actually itemized the different options. So if you're like, hey, I want a 10 by 10 mural, and I'd like this kind of size window decal, this kind of floor decal, light installation, you can kind of pick and choose based on the different budgets. If you want to go back just to page 30, Jess, we did kind of lay out different options at 50, 100, 150, 200, 400 to kind of look at, and just based on our recommendation of what would get the most engagement and what would kind of drive the most traffic. On page 32 as well, we did outline some additional kind of budget considerations, potentially for launch events, and then as well for some content and PR if you want to wrap it all into a package. But I will preface as well, like we're very flexible. Like we like to work collaboratively, and if you say, hey, this is all the budget we have, or this is all that council's interested in giving, what can we get for this? We're happy to work with you on that. We're not going to say, hey, no, like it's only this or this. There's not really black and white for us. We're really collaborative in that way. We've worked with several municipalities before, and we understand that, times are tough sometimes, and yeah, happy to work with you in lots of different ways there. And then finally, at the end, we did have some artists that we have been doing some research on, both in the Crossfield area and the Airdrie area, as well as some artists from Calgary that we worked with. So we kind of included some of their works, everything kind of really bright and colorful, for you guys to kind of peek through and see if there was any interest in collaborating. So Delray was one. On the next page, I think we had Rick Bruce, that everybody's pretty familiar with. On the next page, we had Cheryl Hoff, as well with some of her pieces. And then Snowy Warren is an artist that we've been working a lot with out of Airdrie, just beautiful bright colors. Michelle Bluebelt, done a lot of work with as well in Calgary, really bright, vibrant colors as well. Alicia Lyons, who's a digital artist, who does a lot of the deco work that we work on. And Ness Rimba, who did some of the social distance circles, a little bit more abstract. And then finally, Reese Farrell, who does a lot of really large scale pieces. So he's used to doing kind of those 200-foot plus sort of pieces. So that kind of concludes the presentation and what we're all about and what we're here to share tonight. Is there any questions?
I do have a couple of questions. Like on the side of the old grocery store there, at one time for ACAD, somebody had done a mural there, and it lasted for quite a few years, then started to fade, then started to, disintegrate, was treated and removed. Now, I'm not a structural engineer, don't know anything about bricks, but I was led to believe that the way that paint was taken off, or the type of paint when you took it off, it actually compromised some of the brickwork. And so I guess my question would be kind of a twofold thing. How do you address that, and what is the life expectancy of some of those really bright things? Like, have you had some of them in place for 10 years and they're still that bright, or is the intent that they have kind of a 5-year lifespan? Or
yeah, I mean, I would always recommend with these things, I think 5 years is reasonable. If you get to 10 years, you're really, I'd say you're really fortunate, you're really lucky. And we have seen some murals last longer. Like if you do, upwards of 3 coats of paint, you can get longer lifespan out of it. If you add things like graffiti coating, you are adding to that. But you're right, you can compromise some of the, some of the brickwork underneath. But it depends also what type of building materials, if it's cement or if it's different types of siding or metal. But we can help do that research and prepare that if we're looking at a site, what the challenges and what the obstacles would be for each of those sites.
yeah, and you said you're going to send that to us, right?
Yes,
We're
absolutely.
heading into budget, and so No worries. We'll be taking a look at things, but certainly no decisions made. Questions?
We always have questions.
Yeah.
Awesome. Sounds wonderful.
There's a couple of things, it's more of an internal stuff with us, it's you know, maybe some of this stuff would have been brought up during the initial planning of our downtown, but that's internal. You talked about the local artists, you know, around the communities. Have you ever had the opportunity to, I guess, with the help of the local artists, engage with part of the community, like for example, with school, like the play school, or the you know, some of the children of the schools to help design, come up with, you know, ideas for that, and actually help physically do, you know, the implementation of the art. Have you run across that?
Yes, yeah. So we, a lot of our mall programs, so we have done different ways of integrating community. We used to run an event called Park Family that involves children, and whether it's them sketching out what the artists have done, or integrating technology and having different artists illustrate things on iPads. There's a whole different variety of ways to approach it. I think, again, it depends on what the goals are. Like, are the goals, you know, having that level of community engagement? Are the goals to have the piece last 10 years? Really kind of understanding that and building the programming out to engage that. Like, is that something that we could do with the library, or collaboration with the library? Maybe it's a year-round program where we have different photos or different ways of engaging or inspiration for them. There's several different ways that you could engage.
Yeah, what I'm thinking is, you know, having, you know, kids having some ownership in beautifying your town. Where I'm getting at, so. Couple more.
Yeah, no worries.
When you're talking about putting a mural on the side of a building, like, there's a person that owns that building.
Yes.
We have to certainly have that engagement with how you typically go about that. You let the municipality just do that engagement, or do you get involved and have ideas?
Yeah, so I mean, we've worked directly with business owners, or we worked through municipalities and mayorsies to kind of engage with them. I always like to have that initial meeting just to kind of walk them through what our experience is, because sometimes if you don't build that relationship, there's no trust there. And I think a lot of times with these projects, people are worried it's just going to look like graffiti, or look like a teenager maybe had done it instead of a contemporary artist, or, you know, an artist that has a bit more experience. And then as well, kind of talking to them about what the benefits are. Like, it's not just beautifying, it's also increasing your opportunities for leasing. It's also increasing awareness of their property, and you know, again, like all the PR opportunities, like they're going to have foot traffic drawn to those areas and to those spaces and engagements. So definitely explaining that and kind of talking them through some of the case studies that we've seen with that, especially in Mission right now in Calgary. They've done a lot of these types of projects. They've seen foot traffic increase dramatically from it. And we do have some case studies of building owners that have been able to lease spaces because of those types of projects.
So now that leads me into this.
So just to add on to that itself, with the business owners, we also have had really high level conversations as well to see what their inputs are at the moment. The business owners that we have talked to, such as the Doma itself, they've been really, they have had a positive input into it, and they're really keen on stuff like that. So there has been some high level conversation had with some of the business owners.
So that actually perfectly leads to the next part.
Yeah.
Is it's all about money. Did you guys, or in your experience, be able to recover costs through those business owners because of the extra foot traffic or experience that they are having because of that?
Honestly, it really depends. Depends on the business, depends on the timing. With COVID, people are a little bit less willing to invest, I will be honest.
Certainly.
Which makes sense. But at the same time, you know, some people are willing to do that. So sometimes it's been a cost matching opportunity. Sometimes it's just been the municipalities paying for it all, or sometimes it's also been artist grants and different funding opportunities from the the government at a higher level. So it's been a wide range and mix of funding, but we're open to all those opportunities.
Okay.
So just to add on top of that, we have had additional meetings about grants and everything like that. So internally, we've had the conversation that we are in the process of going for grants for our to fund a portion of it.
Okay.
That is the work for it.
You know, and kind of where I'm getting at is to even partner up with business owners that desire, you know, the artwork or whatever you can offer, and you know, it is going to increase, you know, possibly could increase their foot traffic or experience in the community. You know, for example, the donut man, you know, I'm sure that's not probably the driving factor, is some artwork on it would certainly help, absolutely, but you know, and that's something I guess as a council that we have to decide.
So, and before I open the questions up, if you don't mind, I'm just going to pop in one question because it's hard to see from this distance. But so the green elevator, just as an example, do you, like, we currently have a program in place for businesses that want to beautify or somehow make their properties more accessible. It's $5,000 grant. They just can apply for it. We've given it in two various businesses. We've actually expanded it out of just Railway Street where we started, and we've kind of opened those doors a little bit. But when you show the picture of the green elevator, we've offered that to them a couple of times. I realize $5,000 isn't significant,
Yes.
but it is $5,000 if they spend 10.
Yeah.
Your rendering for one of those of what it could look like, and maybe this isn't fair to ask, but I'm going to ask it, what would the cost of that be?
That is the most expensive.
Yeah, obviously it would be.
Yeah, so right now, we kind of quoted out a smaller version and a larger version. The smaller version is probably between 100 and 150K. Like it's quite significant because the way the artist charges per square foot.
Yeah, I'm just thinking a building like that, it wouldn't increase the foot traffic to them because it's not a, you know, you just don't walk in. So it would probably be the one where, you know, the town would have to take on a good portion of it if we decided to, because then it would bring people in. Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And I just wondered what kind of the price on it was, so thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And it's all outlined.
Sure,
up
yeah,
there.
I'm sure it would be. I
Yeah,
just
we
couldn't
can
see
do, just, do you want to go up, not just the prices, but just the example, I think it's 2 slides up.
It's like building the largest moose.
Yeah, exactly.
The
The biggest pierogi.
Yeah.
There's reason to come and get a picture.
Well, there used to be an old elevator west of town, and I have a picture of it somewhere. It was Sherwin-Williams Paints, I think it was, and they did this whole psychedelic paint job on it. And they used it in their commercials for years. It was in the middle of nowhere. But I mean, if you could get some kind of a promotional for it, you know, then obviously that would help. Questions over here?
Not really a question, more of a statement. So I'm a big believer in placemaking.
Yes.
These are some of the components of placemaking. I think it's a good direction that we're going in. Not often do small towns of our size even think of these things to do and do it in a coordinated way. When we talk about public art, we have to be really careful about which ones we choose and which ones are palatable for our residents. So I'm also a big component of right place, right type of art, and good engagement before we do anything. So I heard you talk a little bit about that, but if we move forward with something like this, that's something that I would be a big advocate for.
Sure, that sounds great. And I think that's something that we're very, very used to doing. We really understand that, you know, there's no point investing in something if the community's not behind you. And so definitely listening to what the community would be interested in is something we'd be very willing to do.
Sure, just on top of that, we have put a plan in place that if we do proceed with it, there is going to be an engagement component where we would have different designs and stuff where we would send it out to the community to look at it, as well as get input from them on what they want to see, as well as coordinating that with the business owners to make sure that, you know, the business owner's vision fits with the community's vision as how would be incorporated with people there?
Because again, using the grain elevator as an example, so say it's $150,000, you've engaged the business owner, 5 years from now, it's very faded or whatever has happened to it. It's not just the 150, it's what you're gonna do with it in 5 years. How do you restore it to something that doesn't just look faded and drag everything down? Or you keep maintaining it, but then every 5 years, you've got to come up with at least that amount of money to refresh it and have it come back. Right?
Yeah, well, and that's something too, like if it was, like, we don't, again, this is just high level concept at this point, but if it was something where it's like, hey, we do want to more seriously investigate that, we can look into that. We can put a, more of an operational plan in place. My background's actually mechanical engineering before I got into all this art stuff. So definitely we can look at the logistics and the longevity of that and come up with a plan. Because you're right, you do want to be considerate of those things. Like it is a really cool idea, but how do we practically put it into place?
Well, and then him referring to the mural that was on that store, I mean, it looked great for a long time, and then when it started to go bad, it went really bad.
It was on the north side too, so the sun didn't kill it for
Yeah.
years, so it survived.
It survived a long time,
Yeah.
but
The
then,
other building, there was the other one to the Winter Olympics. There was a couple things on this side of the building that.
Oh my goodness,
It big.
freaking noise.
yeah.
Well, there's different types of paints and technologies with that too that we can investigate. There's actually a really cool paint, like total side note, that that actually, what was it? It absorbs, yeah, it absorbs CO2 and pumps out oxygen, which is super cool. So it's like a green paint that you can get. I'm sure it's very expensive, so I'm not proposing it for this
I was
necessarily.
gonna say something expensive.
But there are some pretty cool technologies that.
It's like a big chia pet almost.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it.
Super. Any other questions? If not,
I'm into bringing any new people to town to see anything and take a picture, and also I have people that want big things and do that donate.
That would be great. I mean, that's one of the biggest expenses as well. Yeah. Absolutely.
super. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time.
All right. Financial reports, checklisting, accounts payable, not with this, with this agenda bylaw, 2018-18 traffic bylaw. Any questions, any comments, any concerns? We kind of went over this. If the changes were in red. If there's no concerns, can I? Yep.
I did briefly skim through it, I just.
Because we did have it previously, and the changes were discussed, and then it was to bring it back.
Yeah,
Okay, we're good to go?
yes.
Okay, can I have a motion to give bylaw 2020-18 first reading? Okay, all in favor? Can I have a motion for second reading? Okay, all in favor? Do you want to bring it forward for third?
Absolutely.
Okay, all in favor? And I'll give it third and final reading, all in favor. You have to vote. Thank you.
Sorry.
All right, that's covered. Business arising, the only thing that I wanted to add to my notes, we had the planning meeting, and that's listed as an event for all of us. I just wanted to give a shout out to Joe Holstein for the farmers market. It was the weirdest weather that day, and out in front of the community hall where I was, it started to ice, and we were having people fall, and so I was able to get a hold of Joe. He came out with a little cupboard or whatever he has, and he was spreading sand all over, left us with bags of salt, and was Johnny on the spot and addressed the issue. And I mean, I know he was on call, but that was kind of outside the scope of his plan for the day, I'm sure. So I just want to give him a shout out. And then Councillor Harris, you had a question about the courses for AUMA, and I did have a chance to speak to administration this morning on that. Do we know if there is actually a cost for it? You're certainly welcome to take the course,
Yeah, there is a cost that was in the email.
okay?
That was sent out.
Okay, because there is an allowance for council to take those courses if they wish. So I'll make a motion that Councillor Harris be permitted, and you have the one course that that was sent out, right?
Yeah, just the one course. that
Yeah.
was sent out.
Okay, and what was the name of it again?
That's, I can send it to you. That's, do you have it?
Public
Yeah,
engagement.
it was public engagement.
Okay, so we have you, we can, let me just, let's make sure we have it here.
What was the cost?
It's $200. And it's like 4 or 5 Tuesdays.
Public engagement, yes.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, so I'll make a motion that Councillor Harris be, go ahead and take that course. Did you want to take it as well?
I'm okay.
Okay, all right, so that's my motion, all in favor? Okay, and there you go.
Okay.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Price.
We had our meeting together last Tuesday and have some things in the works, but nothing to report right now.
Okay. Councillor Gustafson.
As well with Councillor Price, with our planning meeting. Nothing else new to report. We have been working on some items with, ongoing items with the Rocky View Foundation, but there's nothing new to report there yet.
Okay. Councillor Harris.
Nothing new to report, although pretty happy to hear about the diner and Shorty's getting some recognition through the news, and that also falls a little bit into the placemaking stuff. And if we can be famous for fish and chips, then so be it.
Indeed. Okay, administrative operations update.
Just a couple quick notes. You'll notice we did have a checklist in the accounts receivable. Lori, our accountant, has been home with COVID.
How's she doing?
Good.
But she's doing just fine. I checked with her. We have a little food get together today. She's coming out of the COVID isolation AHS protocol. She should be back in the office at least part of the time, starting on Monday. Everything's been getting done. That's necessity, paying bills, paying staff, collecting money, that kind of stuff. Her brother has been quite sick with COVID as well. So
Her husband okay?
you know, if the report's late, okay, it's a couple weeks late, and catch it up. If need be, I can go and pitch in, run a few things if need be, but she'll be back at it. Lori's pretty vigilant, she'll be taking care of that backlog pretty quick. Wanted to give council a bit of a 2020 budget update as we're going into the 2021 budget year. The big picture is that it's not a huge amount of variation from budget. We're generally on track. Total revenues, taxes and operational revenues are projected to be about $263,000 better than budgeted. On the expenditure side, we're running about $188,000 less than budgeted. So for the year, our best guess is we'll run a cash flow surplus of about $1.3 million. We'll retire about $470,000 worth of debt for a cash position surplus of about $1.78 million. Obviously, there's 6 weeks to go with snowstorms, water breaks, a lot of things can happen between then and now. Out of that $1.78 million cash flow surplus, we allocate $1.583 million of that to amortization, basically to pay for capital assets that wear out. So we're looking at a TCA surplus this year of right around $200,000. We typically budget to be very, very close to the break-even budget, so we're a couple % better than that. But hey, it's how many snowstorms we have between then and now, let me know. While we're projecting a bit of a modest surplus this year, obviously there's been some unusual factors. Included in that $200,000 surplus is $346,000 of emergency COVID aid from the province. So, You take that out, we'd be at about $150,000 deficit. Going into 2021, we also get our first installment of about $100,000 to pay towards the province's rural policing initiative. So right there, we're looking about $450,000 swing 2021 versus 2020, just on those two items. So a little bit of tough slugging for council to deal with for the 2021 budget. On the some of the details, I did provide a department by department breakdown to council. Nothing really amazing in terms of big swings. 3 departments are down a little bit on revenue. Our fire department's about 35,000 below revenue projections. People are driving less, especially during the lockdown. There wasn't a whole lot of traffic, so there weren't a whole lot of traffic accidents on the QE2, which we service. There weren't a whole lot of insurance claims. Garbage revenues are down about 20K. A lot of that is, especially during the lockdown, people were not using the transfer station. Also, a lot of our construction was delayed this year in terms of new housing. So new residents coming on and starting to pay garbage fees was a bit delayed, so there's a little bit of a revenue loss there. Another important one is our community hall is about $29,000 down on revenues. The stuff that's our bread and butter, weddings, funerals, family reunions, we are literally the AHS do not do list. So we've, at the beginning of the year, we took a stab what was going to be with COVID. We got that one wrong. Revenues that are up a little bit, FCSS revenues are up about $53,000. That reflects a transfer we had from the province for the emergency food hamper aid. So yes, we have about $53,000, but we're spending every penny of it on our food hamper program. So that's just enough money. On the expenditure side, I mentioned we're about $188,000 under budget collectively. The places where expenditures are substantially above budget, the fire department's up about $45,000 over budget, and FCSS, as I mentioned, is up because they gave us more money to give away for the food hamper project. So if you put the whole thing together, revenues were about 2.8% better than budget, expenditures were about 3.2% below budget, and that's a reasonably normal drift based on the way we do our budgets. We obviously have some internal contingencies for the what ifs that can happen. So this is a pretty generic budget year versus actuals.
And that document that you have with that you're just reading off of, that's the one that you gave us at the planning meeting for.
Yeah, I believe I emailed it to everybody as well. We'll be getting into in detail. Lori and I have the budget sort of 90-ish% done. The next time we get together, we'll have the detailed line item by line item, department by department budget for you. 2021 will be a challenging year. A couple other items to note. COVID has reared its ugly head a little bit on COVID. The prime contractor lost 2 crews to COVID isolation, so a lot of the end of year cleanup stuff we had intended to get done this week in the next few days, we're scrambling. We're still going to get everything cleaned up. We obviously have to make everything safe for the winter. The realistic effect on that is a couple sidewalks. We're going to work on lots of the sidewalk. They're likely to end up being temporary asphalt sidewalks till next year when we clean things up. The contractor who's working on behalf of Fortis doing the utility trench on the east side is not as quick as we would have hoped, and they still have a lot of open pit stuff going there. Again, we're going to make sure that all gets cleaned up. They have a few utility walls to install for all the underground stuff is actually done. Our arena, the Vista Park outdoor arena is 99.99% done. All we need now to get ice would be sub-zero temperatures, which would be extremely helpful. We've officially got our 401,000 in a big change from the province's capital program for next year. We've dedicated that to the Munson overlay, so that's officially on the books now. We've got notification of that. And that's really about it in terms of the big financial implications.
Okay. Questions?
steady as she goes.
Of course. Ken, are we able to look at the line items where they went over budget, dive into that a little bit and find out what kind of went, I guess, offside?
Yeah, I'm a little bit, absolutely is the short answer.
Yes.
And I should just sort them. A lot of times, it's really just a coding thing. Like very often you'll find one line item is over by this amount and another line item is under by this amount. Like for example, if you go into administration this year, federal benefits were over, or what we call benefits were over by a certain amount of money. But then if you look at the other benefits line item, we're under by almost exactly the same amount of money because it was just a coding thing.
So that you're saying it's a coding error?
Yeah, it gets corrected. It gets corrected at audit time.
Okay.
There's a lot. I mean, there's within each department. What I tend to do is I look at an entire department and I look at the bottom line.
Yeah.
You know, if Jack coded an extra $3,000 to repairs and undercoded something else by $3,000, I don't really worry about it. You know, because it just gets corrected at audit time. But
Okay.
yeah, but absolutely, and anything that's meaningful, we actually flag. Our system generates a report on a line item by line item basis. And if you want to see where we're over.
Yeah, like I'm a little curious on like why we were over with the fire department. Was it COVID related? Was it something else related? Like what happened there?
The overwhelming thing on the fire department, the two big ones that make up the bulk of the deficiency or the excess expenditure is when COVID hit, we did some crew splitting, where the fire crews are physically isolated from the medical response crews. So there's been a fairly substantial bump in our honorary costs for volunteer firefighters. You know, Ed came to council and said, hey, this is what we want to do. Another one where we're over a reasonable amount is equipment repairs. There was a fairly good size. There was about a $15,000, it's either $15,000 or $25,000, I forget, on a fairly major reversion to our ladder truck. But yeah, I mean, I can very easily.
Yeah, like I'd like to see the before and then the final audit and see where maybe where we
What we do is
just,
when you generate the full report, you get a variance report both by percentage and by dollar value.
now is this communicated back to the departments there as well to say, okay, this is where it's more of a learning for them is, you know, let's try to keep our coding in place.
Yeah,
if that's the problem.
Lori is continuously providing feedback and education.
Fair enough.
But there's value to checking those lines that are over too, in case you need to adjust the budget or they need to bring in their spending or, you know, like for council.
Absolutely, yeah, it's
And
important
there
for
are a
us.
few line items like we just got them wrong because things changed. Like for example, this year we're, I believe, about $32,000 under budget on our electricity bills because we renegotiated our bulk contract and got a little bit better rate than we had going in.
So at that point, would we not just update that line item?
What we typically,
Or we just leave it as is and then wait till the end and then see if it's out to lunch or?
well, I mean, I've been doing budgets long enough that I have a healthy respect for the ability of things to go sideways in a big hurry. So I usually don't count good news till the end of the year.
Yeah, I can understand that. I just, with something like that, we would want to just update it and say, hey, we renegotiated and we're going to revisit just that line.
What we do, and this is actually required by our fiscal responsibility bylaw, is every quarter I bring to council a pretty comprehensive update of this is where we are with the budget.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's enough there to change, say, hi, this is the amended budget. And sometimes there isn't, like in whatever it was, I think it was April with the COVID thing. Hi, the budget we passed last fall, please shred it, here's the new one. So, you know, we update as appropriate. Right?
I understand. One more question. Ken, you said you sent it out to, I just, unless I deleted it, I cannot find it. It was sent by you or sent by Lindsay?
I gave you a copy today as well, but I'm 99.
Do you want to just quick send it up to all of us again?
There's actually a copy sitting in your mailbox,
Perfect. Okay.
Oh, okay.
like your physical mailbox.
Okay.
Slot for you.
Fair enough.
I believe I emailed it, but if I didn't, my apologies.
Yeah,
I know there's one definitely, but I went and stole a copy from somebody's mailbox.
it could be mine.
So I made,
That's why you don't have it. He's held it from here.
which I thought so that I could give it to you personally.
I'm still new here.
Any other questions?
For me, I should be good.
Okay,
I think so.
okay. Can I have a motion to accept the administrative and operations update? Okay, all in favor? Okay. Closed session, motion for administration to do an RFQ for snow removal along Railway Street.
Perfect.
All in favor of that motion? Okay, that is carried. Correspondence is there, splash park information, that's for reading, upcoming events, nothing, because of COVID seems to be, who knows where that's going, seems to be everything tightening up again. I guess we'll follow the province and see what they say. A question, now today I sat in on a meeting of emergency services for how they're going to deal with the office and COVID and the increasing numbers and that kind of thing. A question, and I mean, I don't know that we need to make a decision, but maybe before the next council meeting, we might have to send out an email. Because they're now limiting, and depending on how you calculate or what you define yourself as a group, if we keep ourselves to 50, we've got live stream options for our council that would allow for council and staff, and you know, if we've got any delegations for them to come in and still keep our numbers down. Do we want to leave council chambers open to the public and limit the number of people in here, or do we want to close it for the public other than delegations and then do live stream? Do you want to make a decision tonight? Do you want to see what kind of the province does with tightening up regulations? What's your pleasure?
I would prefer to table that and wait for the province, or see where the province goes with this.
Okay.
You know, they could go either way. You know, if they give us direction, I guess we could make our own direction. You know, we can.
Yeah, I know.
But you know, I would prefer to keep the public open and go by. You know, if at all possible, if we do have to limit it, it would kind of. You know, you hate to limit the amount of people coming in, but, you know, for everybody's safety and well-being, I do agree with.
Part of the challenge is trying to keep stuff clean. Like with staff, they've made a decision, they're kind of going to split themselves into two teams. So one team will be here 1 week, then they'll have the cleaners come in, do a deep clean before the next team comes in the next week. So depending on what we're touching, how many people are here, they're having some in-person church services here now, right? So does that add to the requirement for us to I don't know.
Yeah, like I wipe down tables and chairs before and after council meetings.
Yeah. So, thoughts?
So I think that Crossfield as a whole has done a really good job at being personally responsible for themselves. Our numbers show that, and I just want to encourage everybody to keep doing that. Yeah, for us personally, I do want to table it because I want options to be brought back to us from staff to see which direction we can go, and what aligns with the provincial government's mandates.
Sure. Perfect. Yeah, and this just was a meeting this morning, so we haven't had time to really put it on the agenda. Deputy Mayor Price.
I want to leave it as is until we're told we have to change it.
Okay.
On a kind of a related matter, first of all, a big shout out to the staff. I did mention Lori, our accountant, came down with COVID, but that was a contact absolutely external from the town. She didn't get it here. The crew in the office and in public works has done a very, 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 very good job. We've had an excellent bubble working here. We've had people working in the office the entire time, and we've kept service levels pretty decent to our citizens. One of the things we are actively considering, and there are some minor budget implications on this, is we're actively considering going to a split crew situation where we basically divide into two teams. Team A works in the office, physically in the office this week, while Team B works from home. And then the next meeting we switch, or the next week we switch it, so that if somebody were to come down with something, we'd only be isolating half our staff as opposed to all of our staff. We are most of the way there in terms of the technology. We are actually in very, very good shape going in from a technological point of view. As you know, we have a fiber optic connection. We've got lots of bandwidth. We have a fully configured VPN server to allow people to work from home. We'd like to extend that to a couple more staff people so that they're fully able to work from home. And we'd also, frankly, like to bump up the cleaning protocols around here. Typically, when you go to a team of blue and gold or A and B or whatever we want to call these teams, after the first team leaves on Friday, you have a deep clean come in on either the Friday night or the Saturday. We'd like to maybe bump up the outside contracting cleaning so that after the group leaves, we do get a deep clean, and then there's fits for 48 hours, and the next group would come in nice and clean. We'd also need some minor purchases for computer hardware related. We're estimating that the additional cleaning costs would be something on the order of about $1,500 a month, and we're probably looking at like $4,000 in computer expenditures. Our best current projection on administration is that we're going to be about $63,000 under budget for the year. You know, if council just wants me to go ahead, amend that number to 55, 54, something like that. I don't know if council feels you'd like to have a motion, obviously give us a motion, or, you know, it's well within the budget parameters of the department, so.
Well, I
whichever
get,
way council wants.
yeah, I mean, I mean, that was kind of the consensus of staff, was to split the staff like that. That would work best and be the best step forward. So whether, if you want a motion that be reallocated, that's fine. If you want to go just by department and take it out of that department, that works for me too, kind of.
Just one thing, because I'm a control freak in my shop for who, what, where, when, how. My one argument to having our own building is, what if the churches do the same thing we do? We deep clean, we pay, we do, we get, and they come and have an event and it screws up our whole thing, because then really it's, like, I know we're shared accommodations, but right now in my shop, I have no shared accommodation. I have this area, and I have nobody else renting, coming and going, because that's one reason, because we're very strict at what we do. But how do we know, or how can we tell their own individual people of the church that, hey man, you can't do that? How does that working for you dealing with this? So how's your job doing with that stuff?
The United Church, the mothership, has issued COVID guidelines to all their.
And you're happy with that?
What do you call it? What is the word?
Parishioners.
Parishioners,
Yeah.
or individual churches, and their guidelines are substantially stricter to
Like
ours.
that, I think so. Okay.
Just from casual observation, the church has been pretty good when, you know, when they have gone back to limited in-person Sunday services. You know, they're wiping it down pretty well. And we
don't want to go to church. I just like, no, if we have a deep clean on Sunday night after they're clean, when our people come in on Monday, then you know that nobody's been in here.
And maybe we should, I mean, I don't think it'd be at all wrong to have a discussion with the minister.
Just
Right.
everybody's on the
Yes.
same lane. Like,
And you know what, send them our new protocols on what we want, and when we're doing the cleaning, and when the switchover is, so that they're fully apprised of what we're trying to do, and then they can.
I'll have Russ liaison with their,
Good.
their administration people.
Yeah.
then Russ is saying picture. Then
Russ is our custodian of all things safety. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention, the LED sign. 4 hours of my life I'll never get back.
Okay, all right.
And you thought that bad for the Chinese course, I took it, a complete waste of money. Oh, yeah.
Okay, we are now to gallery questions.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Got your old Steve Justin.
That's excellent.
Welcome, Kim, welcome, Justin. A little disappointed to see that chair empty over there.
So just before you start, you need to state your name.
Oh, sorry, I'm Dan Willis.
Thanks, Tim.
Just trying to get my notes here, got a little sleepy there. Like, when?
I appreciate that. I appreciate you stating your name, because it helps me, because I write every question down, and then I can refer back to it if somebody asks me again.
So a couple of concerns I have, when you guys were talking about budget and downtown and everything, so this is kind of nice. I have a concern of the budget that was approved for the message board outside here that came from China and replaced the other one that got removed. Hasn't been used. What a waste of money. When are we gonna get our money's worth from it down the road? Second concern, revitalization. You're gonna not like me on this one, sir.
That's okay.
No parking signs in front of your establishment.
I know.
We need to get rid of those no parking signs if there's delegated parking. We have too many people coming from out of town that don't know that you can park there. You don't own that parking sign doesn't mean that that person shouldn't park there. Get rid of those signs.
That's by the pharmacy or?
That's your building, the pharmacy, over at the arches in front of that, the old folks do their thing with the Western wear. Those signs should not be there, that's parking.
Yeah.
So let's get rid of this ugliness, no parking, and make it parking and make it pretty. If we're spending money, let's make the downtown look
For
pretty.
sure, I'm parking.
That's the two. Second thing, I remember when I moved here 15 years ago, we had a nice wetland on the 2A. When you drove by, what I call and what lots of other people call now, the weed pit. Is any of that delegated wetland? And if it is delegated wetland, did the proper procedures and applications get put in place for the dirt and the weeds to be brought in to contaminate the environment nearby? If we look at that, all that dirt and all those weeds are for it. We're contaminating the environment beside us. Is any of that wetland? Those are my questions.
Which one are you talking about? The one directly here?
I'm talking John Verhagen's property over there at the storage lot where all the mounds of dirt are. It used to be a lot more marshland when I first moved here 15 years ago. There was wetland on that side, and we lost a lot of the wetland. I flew a drone there 2 months ago and I went back 7 years, I think, Google Earth images. What a big difference you can see. I don't know if the council and the town are aware of it, but if we did, if the applications didn't get put in place, what a waste of beautiful wetland and a destruction of our environment.
And it's not a wetland. We had that checked with Alberta Environment long before he started messing around in there, so yeah.
So even where the power lines are, and people dumping stuff right in the power lines, don't force on that. So when you're dumping dirt and other people's property and bringing in weeds, I think we should have a concern.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question. You're talking about the wetlands that are on the west side of the 2A highway?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to get, I'm lousy with geography, but I'm embarrassed.
When we first came here, there used to be a car in the swamp.
Where the old road was.
Where the old road was, you know?
Yeah. Between the
Now
road
we've got
and there.
that billions and billions of liters of dirt in there with all this foreign weed. Was any of it wetland? And if it's not wetland, okay, that's fine. If it's not wetland, then we get rid of the eyesore.
Yes.
It is a huge eyesore to this town for the last 7-8 years. Thank you very much.
I have to be very careful how I phrase this. The town, generically speaking, and not referring to any specific property, is in active communication and cooperation with the environment on files of interest for the citizens of Crossfield.
Oh, and the citizens of Crossfield, there's real citizens of Crossfield that have more than 42 people, and we all are in support of the masks. Thank you very much for your time.
So thanks. Hey, Dan,
Masks save lives.
Dan, can I go further to your asking about the wetland?
Yes.
Mayor Tanner had said you guys had research that
Yes.
about that. Is there any documentation that we could provide
We
our
certainly will
citizens?
have,
with
yeah.
that?
I may have the year slightly wrong, but I believe it was about 2011. Don't quote me on that, but I'm close.
Okay, I'll just put around.
Yeah, circa 2011,
Okay,
the town had a full biophysical assessment done of all the biological diversity in this general neck of the woods. The wetlands that Dano spoke of, I believe, have been designated a class 3 wetland under the biodiversity scale that the province has developed for those.
okay, so it is a wetland.
Yeah, it's been officially designated as a class 3. There's a scale for wetlands, okay?
Okay,
Goes from 1 to 5.
fair enough.
Like 1 is, yeah, occasionally there's a little bit of water there in the spring, there's really not much there.
So possibly 3 is in the middle.
Yeah, the big one on the
Or
east side of the 2A is class 5.
Fair enough. The
The
water
dream,
stays there all the time.
the dream wetland that Dream actually didn't have to preserve it, but they preserved it because they wanted to. That was designated a class 4 wetland. How it works is,
So do we have a full write-up of all the wetlands around?
yeah, I can, we had penchant bio something to report back in 2011. I can absolutely give you.
Okay.
But Ken, I am sure that when we have that checked, he, under the certain permitting, et cetera, he was allowed to haul dirt in there because it was a man-made wetland and not an officially designated wetland under the provincial criteria.
There are,
Mayor, can I ask you one question?
Certainly.
The dirt that's coming in, are we 100% sure it's not contaminated? Do we know where it's come from? And what applications and processes and paperwork are behind that dirt?
That refers back to Ken's earlier comment.
yes, all of the dirt that is going there has been tested. And the town has access to those tests. So they are legitimate tests done by a neutral accredited third-party testing agency.
Can you quote me the most recent test for the next council meeting, please? The last test done?
Yeah,
Can you provide that for me for the next council?
I'm 99% sure I can make that public, but I will read the rules just to make sure it's not non-disclosable. I'm 99% sure.
It's environmental information.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I can release it, and if my lawyer tells me it's okay to release it, I will absolutely bring it.
I have a question on that property. Do we know if Alberta Environment has ever investigated that property or if it's currently under investigation?
Generically speaking, and not referring to any property in particular, I know that Alberta Environment does have active files in this area where specific properties are being monitored for compliance in terms of remediation plans.
Is council, I think we should know, as council, we should know all of the areas that are of concern.
Yeah, I mean, if council would like, obviously this is an enforcement matter that I'm pretty sure, I believe Alberta Environment has the authority, and if you wanted to go look at the Alberta Environment website, it could probably tell you a lot of these questions, but I don't think I am allowed to release this information.
Yeah, you can. I mean, whatever happened to our contaminated sour processing plant, I believe back in 2010, a report identified hydrocarbons and chloride and metals. In our water and soil exceeding the provincial guidelines. In the last 4 years, what type of investigation, sampling, and remedial work? So this is stuff that you should be providing the citizens of Crossfield when you get a direct question. Not being back around the bush and say, right, but.
I'm being very, very careful. I'm not, I want to review exactly what I can release.
Okay, so then just say you'll bring the facts back, because those facts are public knowledge.
Yes.
So
Well, let me directly answer the question. If my lawyer tells me it's illegal for me to release it, I'll release it.
okay,
Well, then
so,
I'm asking council to get this information
Yeah.
for me, and Boston can.
Well,
Yeah.
no, but I say myself, obviously, there are rules regarding what can be released.
Environmental rules and public knowledge,
Yeah,
there's
and-
no point on that.
And to the degree that it is allowed to be released, we will absolutely release it.
so
So I think
I'll make a motion that for the next council meeting, you research all the information that is available on that property regarding the wetlands and the soil testing, and bring it to, and have it for council,
Yeah, and,
before the meeting, so we can go over.
yeah, actually, I want to be very, very careful that I'm not releasing information I'm not allowed.
Well, but if you make it as part of your report to council, then we can go through it, and
Yeah,
you'll have already vetted out what's available.
I'll consult with the powers that be in terms of what we can do.
So, well, I guess
If
what we
I'm allowed to
can release
release
to
it,
the
I
public
will.
versus
I guess
us,
that's the
we
direct
can
answer.
release everything.
That's fine, I
Yes.
mean, maybe tonight check out the undertaking of Noble Phillips and we had missed it back, it was 4 or 6 years ago. That sour gas plant, I don't know if we're still getting things tested and the remediation is going forward. Things change and get forgotten, well, that's why I'm bringing it up now.
Yeah.
Thank you for your
So
time,
before
council.
we make a motion,
Yes.
I just wanna, Daniel, have you ever called the Alberta Environment Director?
That's on my list of things to do this weekend.
Yeah, because I think that would be a good
I have-
idea. They may be
I have
able to tell you some.
I do have their number, and the one person I got a hold of, I had to go up and change, so I'm expecting a phone call back from them this week sometime.
Perfect.
All right. I'll still leave my motion in place for a report back.
Yeah, so just so that I have my to-do list correct, you'd like the pension biophysical diversity report, you'd like any active or environment files within the town of Crossfield.
Yeah, and any information that you can give us on the most recent soil that's been brought out there and
Yeah,
tested, if that's,
put that in the motion so I don't forget it.
that is my motion,
Okay,
included in my motion.
I just like to get it all in the motion because
That soil testing results also be included in that report. Okay, that's my motion. All in favor? Okay, that's carried.
Thank you, that's just a.
Somebody else is gonna have something to say.
Okay,
Okay, I'll say something, just if I may.
Absolutely.
Just one thing that I noticed.
could you stand up and state your name, please?
Yeah, my name is Ben Belfiello, and the one thing I actually noticed just with the construction, I really think it's going along quite well, and I think it's nice that they're doing the revitalization. And the one thing I just want to make sure is that, and are they going to be doing, making sure that, that they're hoarding off, like, I noticed that some of the earlier reports they did during the sidewalk thing, it looks like some of the hoarding might have impacted with the surface. So if there's any deficiencies related to that, like, are they making sure that, that the concrete wasn't freezing during the actual process and that it actually did have time to cure properly? And just because that's the only thing I wanted to know, and also a comment about the presentation about the revitalization, or I guess for the art thing as well, just as like
The placemaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be cool to do something like that.
And certainly, yes, certainly was a concern about the cold. We'll be stress testing it for sure in the spring. There is a warranty period of time, so we'll certainly be following that because that was,
And use
Yeah.
you're obviously know a little bit about concrete. There's a standard impact as young as modules test. We have a 2-year warranty on the concrete. We made it explicitly clear to the contractor that when they're reporting those temperatures, it's at your risk, buddy. If it ain't right, we're ripping it out and we're paying for it.
that's very good, yeah, because that's
So-
nice. But just-
Yeah, I mean, there's a really standard test, like,
Yeah.
there's an impact test where at a certain stress level, if it breaks, it's bad concrete. And if it breaks, well, it has to be replaced anyway at their expense. So,
That's perfect.
yeah, we have extremely tight procedures in place to, it's not that I don't trust contractors, it's just that I don't trust contractors.
No, definitely, yeah, no, it makes sense though, yeah, because we don't want them crumbling around and walking around like spring.
Yeah.
So that's great, but in regards to the art, the only other thing I noticed during the presentation was just that, like, north-facing walls would be a real problem for hail impact as well, especially because it would all, I think it would depreciate much faster based on the environmental elements of it. And also too, like the coloring, just in, part of the reason why my wife and I moved to Crossfield was just because of the, sort of, there's a certain appeal to it, very classy, sort of, nice appeal, and I just would, sort of want you to consider the the actual historical element of it, not, implement anything that would clash with sort of some of the reasons, because it is a very beautiful town. And, I know they mentioned comparison to some of the projects they work on in Abbotsford. And, Abbotsford's, 50 times larger than Crossfield, and it's, it's very different sort of culture that I would say. So it's just, but yes, but the idea is beautiful. Like the revitalization, I think is wonderful. Just making sure that it fits well.
Small town, home community, yeah.
And I hope to see out in the engagements when those happen.
Yeah.
I would love to, yeah. This is my first time coming to a meeting, so that's perfect. It's very nice. Okay.
So, thank you for coming.
I live in New Smith Ave, so that's where it's like,
Okay, I know you look familiar.
Yeah.
So Ben, I have a comment about your question, or actually your comment about your assessment of what's going on. And that got me to think is how we plan these revitalizations or these projects and where we get to. And something you brought up about possibly deficient in the concrete or any other things is a question to you, Ken, is a full post-project review. And after that is done, like, even after this year, we're stages where they're at. So, and they're at the end of this basically term. They've got a couple little things to do. Is council able to get a post-project review?
Yeah,
with everything.
what we're planning to do is, once we button up 2020, which will be in the next couple, 3 weeks, we're going to bring obviously a detailed report to council. Hey, this is where we are on the budget, and this is what's been done, this is what needs to be done. We're going to be in the helpful position where I don't want to put a number on it until the dust settles, but we are helpfully under budget on this project, and that will give council some choices. It is something for council's consideration. Maybe they want to do a little bit extra on downtown in terms of beautification. Maybe they want to do some place safe. Maybe they want to save some money and just put it in the bank. Maybe they want to divert it to something else. But that will obviously be part of the discussions. And we'll give you our very, very best estimate of what dollars we needed to bring it home in early 2021. We're past the danger portions of the project in the sense that if things were going to go massively off budget, it would have been in the underground, and the underground's all done. So there are still some variabilities in terms of lighting and decorative items coming in from suppliers, some of them outside the country, currency fluctuating. It's not risk-free at this point, but we've got a pretty good handle on what the numbers will ultimately be.
So when will council expect this project review?
I'm thinking you need 2 weeks, you need 4 weeks.
I'll say about 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay.
I'm just waiting for the final invoice to come in for this year.
Just
So once we get that final invoice to come in, we will know where we ended off for the year itself. From there, we will also be providing a list of everything that finished this year that we got completed, and a list of what will be doing the following year, and as well as what the impact would be to the public. So basically, most of the stuff that we do have remaining for the construction will be minimal impact to traffic and everything like that. As it relates to the concrete question with curing and everything, we were constantly monitoring it to make sure that it was at a 24-degree temperature, so we had it heated for the whole time. And like Ken mentioned, it's at the end of the year, once the summer comes around, we will test it again to make sure that it is meeting spec. With heating and boarding, it's very easy to tell if concrete doesn't perform the same way, because it'll start flaking.
Yeah.
So we will notice that in summer, but it will be interesting.
I do have a question for you.
No,
Sorry, I'm full of questions. Are we able to see a kind of a before and after picture of what we wanted to have happen and what actually did happen? Is really what I'm looking for. Is what was
done, what didn't get done?
No, I wouldn't go that far. Is what did we show the town what we were going to do versus what did we actually do? Is that a fair question, council?
Very minimal differentiate, very minimal deviation.
Based on the concept plan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So,
Teach the concept plan with what the design does after the concept of the presented.
Yeah.
And not just what we actually see with our eyes, but if we had Superman X-ray eyes, what happened down?
For sure. So we documented everything as it relates to the underground and everything like that.
So any change orders, any,
Yep, we have all the documents.
perfect.
It's just going to be a very long process or a very long time for yourself.
Yeah. Oh, no.
I can get that for you.
Yeah.
Underground, there were no major deviations. There was some valve work, there was some, we had to realign one water main, like, whatever, a few feet. It was pretty darn close. There was some elevation changes, but nothing fundamental.
So with that, you'll include the deficiencies that we know of now in that report.
Sure.
As well as a review of the sidewalk running down and how narrow it is. I don't know if it meets standards for two people to walk there at the same time.
The east side is not.
Right.
Yes. The east side is considered a standard side.
Right, so if you can bring a review back of that and what it would cost to bring it up to standard, because I don't think that the way it sits now is, right.
So you were talking about getting the east side to become I guess, for two people to be able to go simultaneously at one.
If we're building a walkable downtown and we have a sidewalk that is too narrow for two people to pass by, or even for a stroller to be on or anything like that, then we fail.
So what we do is when we look at designing the sidewalk and stuff, is we use two strollers itself, right? So two strollers should be going simultaneously. So when it came to the concept design for the east side, the discussion was had with council and everybody on priority list. What was our priority? So one of the priorities was walkability. We try to incorporate as much walkability as we could with the downtown. The other component was greenery and adding the trees and everything like that, right? So when it came to the design concept on the east side, looking at the type of businesses that were there, the decision was made to incorporate a standard sidewalk while incorporating greenery and more trees and everything like that. As it relates to adding more onto the sidewalk to make it a bigger sidewalk, it would not be possible unless we get rid of the trees and all the greenery, because we'd be going on private property.
Unless we went.
That's debatable because I think you have room to go the other way. So if you could bring that information back to us so that we can make a decision on that as well. Thank you.
Okay. No further questions? I'm going to adjourn. Thank you.